Something very unusual happened this week. Donald Trump held a cabinet meeting, the kind of organized event where he sits at a very long table surrounded by people who just agree with everything he says, but this time things went differently. In the middle of his unclear remarks about trade deals and made-up economic wins, Fox News did something they almost never do. They stopped showing it. They just cut away, went to a commercial break, and came back talking about something else entirely. When your own supportive news channel, the one that spent years defending everything you said, explaining away every mistake and cleaning up every power grab, decides they can no longer show you to their viewers. That tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't Fox News protecting Trump. This was Fox News protecting their audience from Trump, because what they saw in that cabinet room was a man clearly falling apart mentally and physically. Even they knew there was no way to put a positive spin on what everyone could plainly see. Let's look at what actually happened in that meeting, because the clips that got out are truly disturbing. Trump tried to explain recent economic numbers, and I say tried very generously. What he really did was throw out random figures, confuse countries with companies, and at one point completely forgot what he was saying in the middle of a sentence. He said, and these are his exact words, "We're bringing back 400 billion, maybe 500 billion. Some say 600 billion from China, from Canada, from the European Union, which is basically Germany if you think about it. And nobody has ever seen numbers like this, the biggest numbers in history. None of that means anything. Those aren't policy ideas. That's not even a twisted version of the truth. That's a man reaching for numbers he thinks sound impressive while having no clue what he's actually talking about. But it's not just what he said. Look at how he looked physically, the way he gripped the table, the way he leaned forward like he needed the furniture to hold himself up, the way his staff, Carolyn Levitt, Stephen Miller, whoever was there, watched him the way nurses watch a patient, ready to jump in if something went wrong. And afterward, he didn't take any questions. He didn't walk over to the reporters. His team rushed him out of there as fast as his weakening body could go, because they know. Every single one of them knows. Clears throat. Here's what has become completely obvious. Donald Trump's staff isn't serving him anymore. They're handling him. Clears throat. There's a big difference. Compare how much he appears in public now to his first term. Back then, whether you liked him or not, the man was everywhere. Daily press briefings, hour-long unplanned rants. He would stand in front of his helicopter and just talk. It was stream of consciousness, sure, but he was alert and present. Now he barely shows up. When he does, everything is carefully planned. He uses a teleprompter for remarks that he would have made off the top of his head in 2017. Only pre-approved questions are allowed. Media access is limited. And the moment anything goes off script, they pull him away. Why? Because the people around him, Stephen Miller, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, are no longer working to advance Donald Trump's goals. They're pushing their own, while he falls apart in front of everyone. There were recent reports that Miller runs a separate private communication line with Trump, feeding him information all day long, basically creating an unofficial power structure that goes around the official White House chain of command. That's not loyal staff work. That's a power grab. That's someone making themselves the real decision maker while the president in name only gets worse and worse. Elon Musk has openly disagreed with Trump's own policy statements. J.D. Vance is already doing his own interviews, presenting himself as the calm, reliable leader of the administration. These people aren't serving Trump. They're using him. They're getting rich, pushing their own plans, playing the stock market with inside information, and just waiting for the unavoidable moment when he's too far gone to stop them. Clears throat. Donald Trump has become a figurehead in his own White House, and everyone around him knows it. But here's where it gets really telling. Here's where Trump's mental state becomes impossible to look away from. You may have heard about this already. Donald Trump is currently holding up federal infrastructure money, specifically funding for the Gateway Project, which is vital transportation infrastructure for the Northeast, unless he gets his name put on Dallas Airport and Penn Station in New York. Read that one more time. The President of the United States is using blackmail against a sitting senator, Chuck Schumer, to get public buildings renamed after himself. On the surface, this is just sad. It's the behavior of a deeply insecure narcissist who never got enough attention growing up. But it goes deeper than that. Because when you look at the pattern of what Trump has been doing over the past few months, a clear picture forms. And that picture is of a man in total panic about how he'll be remembered. He renamed the Kennedy Center to include his own name, making it the John F. Kennedy and Donald J. Trump Center for the Performing Arts. He couldn't even let JFK have that one thing to himself. He's ordered the construction of a huge arch in Washington, D.C., a literal monument to himself that historians have compared to the kind of ego-driven projects built by Saddam Hussein and Stalin in their final years. He's trying to rename military bases, government buildings, any structure that has federal money attached to it. Why? Why this sudden obsession with monuments? Because history shows us that when dictators sense the end is near, whether that's political, physical, or both, they speed up their monument building. Saddam Hussein's palace construction went into overdrive in the late 1990s when international sanctions had him isolated. Stalin's worship of his own image grew stronger as his paranoia and health got worse in his last years. It's a pattern. When authoritarian leaders know their time is running out, they try to lock themselves into stone because they understand something basic: they've lost control of their own story. And Trump knows he's lost control. You can see it in his social media posts. You can hear it in the way he's been talking lately. He started this week, and I'm not making this up, talking about whether he's going to get into heaven. He just posted it out of nowhere. He wrote something like, "The nasty fake news keeps reporting that I said I'm not going to heaven." It was a joke, but they reported seriously because they're terrible people who want to make me look bad. First of all, nobody was reporting that. He brought it up on his own. He's the one who can't stop thinking about it. Second, Donald Trump, a man who never talked about God except to win over religious voters, who couldn't name a single Bible verse when asked, who famously said he's never asked God for forgiveness, is now fixated on whether God will judge him. That's not politics. That's psychology. That's a man facing the reality of his own death and realizing that no amount of spin can change what's coming. There are reports from inside Mar-a-Lago that he's been having conversations about his funeral, about how people will remember him, about what will be said about him after he's gone. He's trying to negotiate with history in real time. And he's losing that negotiation. You want to know the most perfect symbol of Trump's panic about his legacy? The Kennedy Center situation. After Trump forced his name onto the building, after he held a big renaming ceremony, after he stood there smiling like he'd done something meaningful, the Kennedy Center shut down. Just closed with no set date to reopen. Officially, they said it was for renovations and reorganization. But let's be honest about what really happened. Donald Trump couldn't stand the idea that his name would be next to the legacy of a real president, a president remembered for his vision, his way with words, and his sacrifice. So rather than let that comparison exist, rather than risk the building not getting the worship he demanded, he just closed it. He took his ball and went home. And here's my prediction. Write it down and come back to it. In 10 years, every monument Trump is building right now will be a source of embarrassment. Hotels will remove the Trump name to avoid being boycotted, and some already have. Buildings will be given new names. The arch will be torn down or turned into something else. His own children will try to distance themselves from the brand, and some already are. The monuments he's so desperately trying to build won't protect his legacy. They'll become places people visit to laugh. People will go see Trump's folly the way they visit Confederate monuments, not to honor them, but to remember what we got past. Donald Trump senses this. He knows this, and it's destroying him inside. But here's the thing. This isn't just about one aging man's vanity. This obsession with monuments, this panic about his legacy, It's connected to something much more dangerous. It's connected to what his administration is trying to cover up. Because at the exact same time Trump is trying to build monuments to himself, his administration is systematically wiping out other people's history, specifically black history. It started right away from day one of this administration. The rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, the removal of materials from the Smithsonian, the changes to school curriculum, forcing schools to take out discussions of slavery, Jim Crow laws, and the civil rights movement from American history classes. Remember the Enola Gay situation? They ran a computer search for the word gay in federal museum records and just started deleting things. They removed an entire exhibit about the plane that dropped the atomic bomb because the word gay appeared in its name. That's the level of foolishness we're dealing with. But it's foolishness in service of a very specific goal, which is erasing history. Now, a lot of people rightly said, of course, Trump wants to erase black history. He's a racist. His administration is full of white supremacists. They don't want those stories to be told. That's true, but it's not the whole truth, because the reason they're erasing black history isn't just hatred. It's a deliberate strategy. Fascism needs people to forget history. Authoritarian rule cannot survive if people remember how it works, what it looks like, who it targets, and how it has been fought before. There was a podcast conversation recently between Andrew Schultz and Charlemagne the God that captured this perfectly. Schultz, who, let's remember, defended Trump, made excuses for Trump, told people they were overreacting about Trump, was now expressing shock at what he was seeing. "I never thought I'd see this in America," he said. People being shot in the streets by federal agents, families being ripped apart, armed thugs with badges hunting people down for no reason. And Charlemagne said something so simple, so obvious, and so powerful in response. He said, "You never thought it would happen to white people. Because here's the reality. This is American history. This has always been American history. Where do you think policing in America came from? Slave patrols. That's it. That's the origin. Armed men given power by the government to hunt down black people, return them to slavery, and terrorize communities into obedience. That's where American policing started. The ICE raids happening right now. Agents breaking into homes without warrants, tearing families apart, making people disappear into detention centers. That's not new. That's a copy of the fugitive slave laws, where federal agents were given the power to hunt human beings across state lines and drag them back into bondage. The heavily armed police beating protesters in the streets. The government surveillance tracking activists, the criminalization of people helping each other. Black Americans have been living through this for 400 years. Indigenous Americans wrote the book on it with their own blood. What's happening now isn't Trump inventing American authoritarianism. It's American authoritarianism finally reaching everyone. And that's exactly why they need to erase black history. Because if Americans knew that history, if they truly understood it, they would immediately recognize what's happening right now. If we knew Frederick Douglass, we would know how to speak truth to power. If we knew Harriet Tubman, we would know how to build secret networks of resistance. If we knew Ida B. Wells, we would know how to document terrible acts and force the country to face them. If we knew Fannie Lou Hamer, we would know how to organize at the local level and fight corrupt systems. If we knew about the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program, we would know how to build community support networks that make us less dependent on a government that wants us helpless. If we knew about the labor movements led by a Phip Randolph and Bard Rustin, we would know how to shut down the economy when those in power refuse to listen. They're not erasing history because they hate the past. They're erasing it because they're afraid of a well-informed future. They're terrified that if you knew how black Americans resisted slavery, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration, you would know exactly how to resist them. That's why Trump's monument building and history erasing are two sides of the same authoritarian coin. Build monuments to the regime, erase monuments to resistance. Control the past, control the future, except it's not going to work. Because here's what Donald Trump can't seem to grasp. His legacy is already written. It's done. Clears throat. It's finished. No amount of marble or fancy stone or renamed airports is going to change it. January 6th will be studied for centuries, not as a patriotic uprising, not as a protest that got out of hand, but as a fascist attempt to overthrow the government by a president who refused to accept that he lost an election. His face will be next to the word insurrection in history textbooks forever. His COVID response, telling people to inject bleach, holding packed rallies while hundreds of thousands of people died, tearing apart pandemic preparedness systems because Obama built them. That's his legacy. His family separation policy, children locked in cages, toddlers forced to represent themselves in immigration court, thousands of families permanently broken apart. That's his legacy. His 2 impeachments, his 34 felony convictions, his being found liable for sexual assault, his fraud convictions, his theft of classified documents, that's his legacy. Future generations aren't going to ask, was Trump a great president? They're going to ask, how on earth did Americans fall for this twice? His name isn't going to stand for greatness. It's going to stand for American decline, the weakening of democracy, and the con man who nearly destroyed the republic. Every monument he builds is one more thing to tear down. Every name he puts on a building is one more name to scrub off. Every arch he orders is one more structure future generations will demolish. That's his real legacy, and he can't change it. But you want to know what the real monument to this era will be. It's not going to be his arch. It's not going to be his renamed airport. It's going to be the resistance, the millions of women who marched the day after his inauguration and kept marching, the sanctuary cities that refused to become part of his deportation machine, the election workers who protected democracy while he sent a mob after them, the journalists he called enemies of the people who kept reporting the truth anyway, the lawyers who filed lawsuit after lawsuit to block his worst actions, the mutual aid networks that fed people when his government shut down, the young people organizing climate protests while he gutted environmental protections, the families torn apart by ICE who are fighting to be brought back together, the trans kids he tried to erase who refused to disappear. That's the monument. That's what will be taught. Not his buildings, not his speeches, but the fact that millions of Americans looked at his authoritarianism and said, no, not here, not us, not ever. The monument to this era is every person who resisted. And that monument is being built right now in real time by all of us. Which brings me back to Chuck Schumer and that airport naming deal. Senator Schumer, you have one job right now, one very simple job. Do not negotiate with someone using threats. Do not build monuments to tyrants. Do not give this man one more piece of legacy preservation while he's actively tearing apart American democracy. The answer to Trump's blackmail should be simple. No. Build the Gateway Project because it's critical infrastructure and name it after the workers who built it, not the would-be dictator who held it hostage. This is a test not just for Schumer, but for every Democrat who claims to be part of the opposition. Are you actually going to push back, or are you going to make deals with fascism because it's the easier path? But more than that, this is a test for all of us, because Trump's team is counting on us being worn out. They're counting on us forgetting. They're counting on us not remembering how we got here and who showed us the way out. So here's what we do. We write down everything, every abuse, every lie, every crime. We create the record they're trying to destroy. We learn the history they're trying to hide. Read Frederick Douglass, read James Baldwin, read Ida B. Wells, read the scholars they're removing from universities. Learn the strategies of resistance they don't want you to know about, and we build the other side of the story right now while they're still in power, so that when this era ends, and it will end, the history that gets taught is the true one. Not Trump's fantasy, not his monuments, but the real story of what happened and how we made it through. They want us to forget. Our job is to remember everything. If you've read this far, you're part of the resistance. You're part of that counter monument we're building, and I hope you'll keep building it with me. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a like on this video. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. And if you stayed until the end, drop a blue heart in the comments so I know you're out there fighting. Chuck Schumer, do the right thing. No airports, no monuments, no deals with autocrats. And to everyone else, keep fighting. Keep writing things down. Keep learning the history they're trying to erase. They're counting on your silence. Don't give it to them.